She wasn't very happy about it, bro. Now, I'm going to play some more of this press conference, but something I want to talk about is if Caitlin Clark comes back and drop a goose egg, it's simply Stephanie White's fault. If Caitlin Clark is not playing to the Caitlin Clark we love to see, and we love seeing her hit logo threes, it's Stephanie White's fault.
That was the warning shot fired before the game even tipped off. A prediction from an observer who saw the writing on the wall. And what happened next? Well, it proved him right in the worst way imaginable. The title of this video isn't just clickbait, it's a thesis. Caitlin Clark's reaction to her disastrous return to the court on Tuesday did more than just reflect a bad loss. It pulled back the curtain on a flawed strategy and a potential philosophical crisis brewing within the Indiana Fever. We're not just going to look at the box score today. We are going to connect the dots, using Clark's own words from before and after the game to show you how she essentially predicted this very outcome. Her reaction exposes the fundamental problem with Coach Stephanie White's grand experiment. If you're here for the real story behind the headlines, do me a solid and smash that like button. It lets the algorithm know you want the truth, and it shows us we're on the right track, filtering out the noise for you. All right, let's set the stage. To understand the fallout, you have to understand the prophecy. Before the Fever's July 9th matchup against the Golden State Valkyries, all the talk was about how Coach White would reintegrate Clark after her injury. The team had found some success without her, and the plan was for Clark to play more off-ball. When asked about it, Clark was diplomatic, a total professional. But if you were listening closely, really listening, she told you everything you needed to know. She acknowledged the theoretical benefits, but then she dropped the line that, in hindsight, sounds like a warning flare.
Caitlin Clark comes back and drop a goose egg, it's simply Stephanie White's fault. If Caitlin Clark is not playing to the Caitlin Clark we love to see, and we love seeing her hit logo threes, it's Stephanie White's fault. Don't blame this on Caitlin injury. Don't blame this on Caitlin not playing for a while.
But like I said, that's what I'm best at. She wasn't being defiant. She was stating a fact that was about to be ignored in spectacular fashion. She was telling her coach, the media, and the fans, we can try this experiment, but don't forget who I am and where my value lies. She was laying a breadcrumb, a baseline for what was to come. She knew what her strengths were, and she had a feeling that moving away from them was a gamble. She just didn't know how badly it was about to backfire. And then the game happened. And the gamble didn't just backfire, it exploded on the launch pad. This wasn't just a loss. It was a complete system failure, broadcast live for the world to see. For those of you who watch the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The flow wasn't there. The energy was gone. This wasn't the Indiana Fever team that had just scratched and clawed its way to a championship cup victory. This was something else, something broken. The final score was a brutal 80-61 beatdown by the Golden State Valkyries. But the real story is in the details, in the numbers that show just how catastrophic this off-ball experiment was in its very first test run. Caitlin Clark, the offensive engine of this team, was held to just 10 points on a grim 4 of 12 shooting from the field. Think about that. The most dynamic scorer in the league was neutralized not by the opposing defense, but by her own team's offensive scheme. She was forced into a secondary role, running off screens and waiting for the ball to find her, and the rhythm that makes her so lethal was completely gone. She looked lost. The commentator from the original video we analyzed summed up what every fan was feeling as they watched the struggle unfold.
It'll be nice probably not to have to bring the ball up against pressure many feet.
We lost you in her heat. That's the perfect way to put it. The fire, the command of the floor, the surgical precision that defines her game. It was all stripped away. The team's overall field goal percentage cratered to a season-worst 30.9%. It was an offensive disaster from top to bottom, and it all stemmed from the decision to take the ball out of the hands of their best player. The experiment was meant to give the defense different looks. Instead, it just created confusion and killed any momentum before it could even start. But the numbers, as bad as they are, don't even tell the full story. For the narrative analysts watching, you know the truth is never just in the box score. To understand what really happened, you have to decode the reaction. And I'm not just talking about post-game press conferences. I'm talking about the non-verbal story that was being told on the court and on the sidelines. Okay, now we're starting to get into the reports coming from insiders and analysts who are watching closely. This isn't just social media chatter. This is coming from people whose job it is to read the room. And what they reported was visible displeasure from Caitlin Clark during team meetings and timeouts. Think about what that means. This isn't a player throwing a tantrum. This is the frustration of a high-level professional who predicted a problem, was forced to go through with the flawed plan anyway, and then had to live through the exact negative consequences she foresaw. Her pregame comments were calm and measured, all about finding a strategic advantage.
Caitlin Clark cannot get into rhythm without having the ball in her hand. They're trying to change her style of play, and this spells bad recipe, bruh.
She said all the right things about finding balance and giving the defense different looks. But her on-court reaction, the visible frustration reported by insiders, tells the real story. It exposes the massive gap between the strategic theory cooked up by the coaching staff and the practical reality on the floor. It's the face of a player who knows with 100% certainty that the team is not being put in the best position to win. And that reaction, that visible displeasure, is a direct indictment of the off-ball strategy itself. It's proof that the experiment wasn't just a failure in execution, it was a failure in conception from the very beginning. So, if the experiment was such an obvious gamble, if the player herself was sending subtle warnings, and the result was a predictable disaster, why did it happen? The easy answer is just to place blame.
Like I said, that's what I'm best at, so we're still going to do a lot of that.
And on the surface, that's where the story ends. Bad decision, bad result, coach's fault. But for the narrative analysts, we know it's never that simple. To really understand the why, we have to peel back another layer and try to get inside Coach Stephanie White's thinking. What was the justification? According to White's own philosophy, which she's stated publicly, her job is to push great players beyond their limits. She's on record saying this. Most great players want to be coached. They want to be challenged. They want to be pushed outside of their comfort zone because they want to be the greatest that has ever played. From her perspective, this wasn't about limiting Caitlin Clark. It was about challenging her. It was an attempt to add another dimension to her game, to make her and the team less predictable in the long run. But here's the piece of the puzzle that changes the entire picture. Stephanie White's history with Caitlin Clark didn't start this season. She's been scouting Clark since the 8th grade. This is where the story gets really complex. This wasn't a new coach evaluating a new player. This was a coach with over a decade of observations, finally getting her hands on a generational talent she's watched for years. So you have to ask the question, was this off-ball experiment just a bad tactical call in a single game? Or was this the first move in a calculated long-term plan to forcibly evolve Clark into the player White has always envisioned? Is this a misguided attempt at mentorship or a coach stubbornly clinging to a vision that doesn't fit the reality of her star player's historic talent? And if you're trying to figure out why Coach White might have felt confident enough to roll the dice on such a radical experiment, you have to look at what happened right before Clark returned. Because the single biggest complication in this entire story is that the Indiana Fever became champions while Caitlin Clark was on the sideline in street clothes. That's not speculation, that's a fact. While Clark was recovering from her groin injury, the Fever went out and won the Commissioner's Cup championship, defeating the Minnesota Lynx 74-59. And it wasn't a fluke. They looked tough, cohesive, and played suffocating defense. Natasha Howard was named the MVP. The team reached a pinnacle it hadn't reached in years, and they did it without their generational star running the show. Okay, let's connect these dots, because this is where the digital breadcrumbs lead to a very uncomfortable question, a question many of you have been debating online ever since that trophy was raised. Did that championship win, in a strange way, validate a non-Clark-centric system in the eyes of the coaching staff and maybe even some of the players? Did it give Coach White the proof of concept she needed to say, "See, my system works. Now let's see if our star player can fit into this winning formula," instead of the other way around? This is the core of the debate that's been raging in the fan forums. That win created a second identity for the team, and now those two identities are in direct conflict. What do you think? Did that championship win actually hurt the team's chemistry in the long run by creating this dilemma? Let me know your theory in the comments below. Because when Clark came back, it wasn't a triumphant return to a team that desperately needed her. It was a reintegration into a team that had just proven it could win at the highest level without her. And that changes the power dynamic completely. And if you're looking for more evidence of a potential disconnect between coaching philosophy and the players on the floor, you don't have to look far. You just have to remember a roster move from earlier this season that now seems much more significant in hindsight. I'm talking about the strange case of DeWanna Bonner. This is one of those developments that was quickly swept under the rug by the mainstream sports media, but for those of us connecting the dots, it was a massive red flag. Bonner, a key veteran forward signed in the offseason to bring experience and scoring to the roster, was abruptly waived after playing just 9 games with the team. The official reason given was a lack of fit. Now let's pause and analyze that. A lack of fit. What does that really mean? In the world of professional sports, that's often code for a fundamental disagreement on role, strategy, or philosophy. So we have to ask the question, was DeWanna Bonner's lack of fit an early warning sign of the exact same issue now surfacing with Caitlin Clark? Was she another talented, proven player who couldn't thrive inside the rigid structure of the system being implemented? You don't just waive a key veteran signing 9 games into the season unless there is a serious, unresolvable problem. When you place that event next to the current off-ball controversy with Clark, a pattern begins to emerge. It suggests a potential trend of friction between the coaching staff's vision and the established strengths of its key players. It forces you to wonder if the issue isn't the players, but the system they are being forced into. And this pattern, this series of questionable decisions and on-court friction, has absolutely not been unnoticed. In fact, the digital world has been acting as a massive collective investigative body on this. The verdict from the court of public opinion is in, and it is overwhelmingly pointing in one direction. For weeks, many of you watching have been connecting these exact dots on Reddit, on X, and in the comment sections of videos just like this one. And you were onto something. The consensus online is that the blame for these struggles lies squarely with the coaching philosophy.
It's definitely why it's running this system with trying to play Caitlin Clark off the ball.
That clip perfectly captures the sentiment. The argument resonating across fan forums is that you simply cannot take a generational talent and force her into a system that neutralizes her greatest strengths. It's a recurring theme that the off-ball experiment is fundamentally flawed and risks derailing Clark's development. The online chatter is clear.
You're still going to see a lot of the same things that we do, but at times, move us off the ball, and especially out of timeouts and drops, maybe not so much our live flow and our live play. I think we'll be solid.
That's the core of it. The digital verdict is that they are trying to change the player instead of building a system around her proven abilities. And for many fans, this feels like a frustrating repeat of history, with theories circulating that this is similar to issues the team faced under the previous coach, Christy Sides. The frustration is palpable, with YouTube channels running titles like "Stephanie White's coaching philosophy is destroying Caitlin Clark," It's a powerful consensus. Hit that like button if you've been seeing these same red flags all season. The narrative online is clear. This isn't a player problem, it's a system problem. And if you want a perfect data-driven snapshot of this massive disconnect, the chasm between overwhelming public adoration and a much cooler, more complicated perception within the league itself, you just have to look at the 2025 All-Star voting results. The fans, the people who buy the tickets and the jerseys, have spoken louder than ever before. Caitlin Clark received a staggering, record-setting 1.29 million fan votes. That is the most in the history of the WNBA. The public has crowned her their queen. But then you look at the player vote, the vote from her peers, the other women on the court, and among them, Clark finished 9th. Let that sink in. First in the hearts of the fans by a historic margin, but 9th in the eyes of her colleagues. This isn't just a quirky stat. This is a symptom of the entire conflict we are talking about. It suggests that while the world sees a revolutionary superstar, many within the league, players and perhaps by extension coaches, see something different. Perhaps a player they are still hesitant to fully empower, or one whose ball-dominant style they are quietly resisting. This sentiment is so strong that fans have even brought signs to games targeting other players that read, "9th in your rankings, but 1st in your nightmares." It's all part of the same story. The fans are voting for the Logo 3, no-look pass, offensive genius, but the internal league culture, reflected in that player vote and now in her own coach's strategy, seems to be demanding a different, more constrained, more system-friendly version of Caitlin Clark. The disastrous 80-61 loss wasn't just a bad game. It's what happens when that internal push for conformity wins out over what the entire world can see is her generational talent. So that's where we are. All the pieces are on the table. A disastrous on-court experiment, a coach with a long-term vision that seems to clash with reality, a team that won a title without its star, a fan base in open revolt online, and a league-wide disconnect on how to even value its biggest name. This brings us to the breaking point. Analysts are already reporting that if this trajectory continues, organizational changes may be necessary. Fan speculation is running wild that Clark may eventually need to issue an ultimatum to the front office. It's the system or it's me. So we have to ask the final critical question. Was this 80-61 loss just a bad night? Or was it the tipping point? Was this the moment that forces a confrontation behind closed doors and changes the future of the Indiana Fever? This disastrous return game was never just about one loss. It was the physical manifestation of a deep philosophical conflict that has been brewing all season. It's a battle between a coach's rigid system and a player's undeniable generational talent. The game, the stats, and the visceral reactions from the players and the fans have exposed this fault line for the entire world to see, putting a franchise, its coach, and its superstar at a critical crossroads. So what's your take on all this? What is the end game here? Does Stephanie White need to abandon this experiment completely and just give the keys back to her star player, or does Caitlin Clark need to sacrifice her style and truly adapt to this new role for the team's long-term health? Let me know your definitive take in the comments below. This story is far from over, and we'll be tracking every development, every rumor, and every post-game interview. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on, because you won't want to miss our analysis when the next move is inevitably made. And finally, if you know another narrative analyst who would appreciate this level of breakdown, share this video with them. Help get the real story out there.